Jake Silverstein for a conversation with FP's Andrew Sollinger.
Good mid-morning, everyone. Good mid-morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Mid-morning. It's not that hard to say. We have a fantastic discussion that we're going to embark upon right now. I wanted to preview, though, some of what we're going to be talking about after this. We're going to have, after this discussion on the excellent discussion on the business of global sport investment, we're going to talk about international talent and college sports. We are going to have Senator John Curtis of the U.S. Senate, who's also on Senate Foreign Relations and could have some really interesting discussion with John Haltowanger. I'm going to talk with some folks from the U.S. Olympic Committee and LA28, and we're going to bring the Olympics into this discussion. And we'll finish up with discussion with a couple of athletes, Sally Roberts and Tony Sana, who's a big soccer star, to finish off our program. So please do stick around. But right now, we want to talk about the business of global sport investment, and I'm really excited to be convening this discussion with these three gentlemen. The way I wanted to actually kind of kick this off is to talk about sovereign wealth and U.S. investors investing in teams globally. And there was actually a moment this past weekend. So the Champions League final was played in a very warm Budapest last weekend, and it was PSG versus Arsenal, my squad, but also the forces again lined up against each other were sovereign wealth, Qatar sovereign wealth owning PSG, and Stan Kroenke, the much maligned U.S. investor in sports around the world, actually, but owner of Arsenal. And sovereign wealth won. But it was a really interesting competition, and it's a moment, it really highlights this moment of massive transformation in sports, where you have these outside investors coming into local environments and investing in these franchises, but in everything, from European football to in emerging markets. And it's not just about financial returns. You know, the discussion that we want to have today is a little bit more about navigating complex cultural ties. We want to talk a little bit about balancing profit motives with the important role of public sport for the public. And we are joined by three U.S. team owners who can really bring an interesting perspective. They invest abroad, and we're really keen to get their perspective. So Paxton, Jason, and Jake, thank you for joining us for this talk. I have a couple of questions, actually, that kind of group questions that I'd welcome your takes on. And really, just to start at the top, what is it? Why are American investors so interested and drawn in European and global sports properties? We can kick off with you, Jake.
So thank you so much for having us.
Of course.
I think, at the highest level, the reason so many Americans are focusing on investing in sports abroad is because, to your point, it is really understood that these are more than just simple for-profit enterprises. They are uniquely powerful instruments of participating in the social conversation. Mm-hmm. Sports are a unique force for good in the world. And these clubs bring joy to thousands or millions of people, or, misery and pain, depending on how it goes. And that's really unique. That's really different from a widget factory.
Yeah.
Separately, they can also be tremendous businesses from your ability to underwrite and think long term, your ability to build a brand, to develop ancillary revenue streams. They're quite unique because of the place they sit culturally. And so, I think from the American perspective, the view is that in many ways, we have built a uniquely strong professional sports ecosystem in the U.S. from a business perspective. Mm-hmm. Over the last several decades. The NFL, the NBA, MLB, right. These are exceptionally strong leagues with incredible ownership groups and great visions. And the idea is simply to say, let's try to take some of the best practices and the learnings and figure out how we can tap in and participate in what's happening around the rest of the world with the demographics. And so, at the highest level, that's the reason why.
Exporting that expertise and that understanding and that know-how, very, very good. Jason, how do Americans value clubs differently than local owners in these environments? And are those valuation methods appropriate for sports assets that have such deep community ties?
Well, you mentioned exporting that expertise, and I think a lot of it is importing some of that expertise. And some of the sports that I've been involved in are sports that weren't founded in the United States, such
Examples?
as global football. And so there's a lot to learn in that experience of investing in those sports and understanding. I think about sports globally, and as an investment, I think about 3 C's. I think about community, connectivity, and competition. And they all get me excited. The competition on the field, on the pitch, the community aspect to it, learning so much about a different community. We went into, as an investor in Swansea City, for example, in Wales. I learned so much about that community, what drives that community. I'm an investor in Brisbane, Australia, in the basketball team. Understanding the dynamics in Brisbane, in Australia, leading up to the 2032 Olympics that they're going to be hosting. There's just a lot of knowledge to be gained from that. So I think the mistake that an American investor can make is saying, well, we're going to export all of our knowledge. I think it's more about a combination of exporting and importing, learning and growing together. But certainly American professional sports, from a business perspective, have done some things that are unique, that have grown asset value, that have also grown sort of commercial engagement in a way that I think other countries can learn from. But culturally, I think there's a lot that we can learn just from that experience as well.
Great, fantastic.
Absolutely right.
And I'm sorry.
I totally agree, 100%.
So getting back to that cultural kind of issue and being sensitive to that, Paxton, what are some of the pratfalls that American investors can encounter when and how their ownership models might conflict with fan culture in Europe or Latin America or Asia?
By thinking anything is cookie cutter, because it's not. Each one has to be applied. Like all of to follow on Jason's points about the things that you've learned here, the things that you can learn other places, it all kind of spins back and of itself. And if you go to Brisbane thinking that what you did in Washington is going to work, it doesn't necessarily work that way. So you have to kind of be mindful of the cultural nuances of the particular country or location that you're in, be very mindful of those, and always be open-minded from a learning perspective. You can take the things that you learn from other places and apply those, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the same thing is going to work. So, but to hit your first question that you asked, for me, it's passion, like things that I can be passionate about. So taking what you've learned in Washington, D.C., I'm a part of 6 different sports groups and 2 leagues, and with each of them, I'm trying to take, one, build culture wherever it is that we go, but then 2, take the things that you learn other places and see what of those you can apply and if those can be beneficial in that location.
I'd love to dig into that a little bit because getting back to Stan Kroenke, who's taken a lot of heat over some of his practices, and it took a long time for Arsenal to turn around, just having come out on top in England. One of the things he talks about is he also owns the Rams. He also owns the Denver Nuggets, the Colorado Avalanche. These are all championship teams, by the way, in the past decade. And one of the things that he says is valuable is to make sure you can exchange insights across those different franchises. And it's not necessarily, I don't think he's talking about management skill or economics or ticket sale dynamics or anything like that. I think he's talking about culture. And that's the most important point that you can trip over. I'm just wondering, just to build on that, Paxton, if you have any thoughts on that, if you agree with that. He encourages that interconnectivity. So you've talked about that from a management perspective. Mm-hmm. Did the teams do that as well in your portfolios? Do you have them work together and share experiences and insights?
You would be the better person to answer.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of overlap.
Bouquet.
I think it's a combination, though. I think there are certain, the sports business is a people business, motivating people, engaging people, not just the fans, but even in the locker room and dressing room. And so I think there are certain culture building techniques that apply across the board. I also think that culture in different communities around the world is somewhat different. And so certain levers you can pull to get the most out of a dressing room, to get the most out of a team in one continent may not work somewhere else. So you've got to figure out how does that work together?
Yeah, so that'd be great to dig into. And Jake, I'd love to come to you on this. A little bit about what roadblocks you come into in sovereignty, right? So foreign policy, we talk about geopolitics. I'm not looking to you for geopolitical insight, but you still probably bump up against regional sports authorities and their status and how they run their regions and their groups of teams. So maybe you could kind of dig into a little bit about how they're responding to this wave of foreign investment. And I'm going to, push a little bit on NBA Europe and FIBA, which is the Global Basketball Authority. What's been the kind of response there as best you know?
Sure. Okay, so I'll let Jason help out with the FIBA conversation because you're very close to this. What I would say at a high level is the dynamic between whatever the governing body in a given country is and the top flight professional leagues in men's and women's sports, those dynamics are very different country to country. Part of it is cultural, and part of it has to do with where in the life cycle of professional sports development that country is. And so I'm fortunate to have been asked to serve on the board of a Saudi football club, which has given me totally fascinating perspective into a country that's changing really rapidly across a whole lot of vectors. And spending a tremendous amount of energy and focus on building out what sports means to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the way it expresses who the country is to the world. But they've had a successful top division league over there for many years with a great fan culture and incredible pedigree and wonderful history. But they're changing the league composition and structure now to move from a model where the clubs are owned by the government to one where they're owned by private investors of all stripes and sizes. And so this dynamic between the governing federation and the top division is completely different than, say, in the U.S., where the professional sports leagues have, for a long time, commanded a tremendous amount of respect and authority and taken up a lot of the conversation, which is also very different to the UK, where the structure of the professional leagues is so materially different with promotion and relegation. Which clubs are cycling in and out of the league on any given year means that it's not nearly so tight a coherent group of ownership. And so there's a completely different dynamic there.
So there's another, I'm glad you brought up Al-Ahly.
Al-Ahly, yeah. I'll say it wrong, but it's Al-Ahly.
Al-Ahly, which is the Saudi football club. You were the first foreign national on the board ever. And I think Enfield, which you're involved with, also has a partnership with Surge, which is the sports arm of PIF.
Yes.
You can also speak to, I started off talking about the difference between American investors and sovereign investors. Maybe you could speak to that because you have some interesting insight into the political dynamics, not just the economic dynamics around those sovereign wealth funds as opposed to private investors.
Sure. Well, so, I can only speak, I can't speak on behalf of a sovereign fund. What I can say is my understanding of the landscape. Each sovereign fund that's getting involved in sports is approaching it a little bit differently. The goals are slightly different and they're nuanced around what the country's strategy is, how they relate to sports, how much of the investment is driven purely by financial returns, what's the time horizon, how much of it's tied to a broader strategy, and as I was alluding to, a conversation about what the country represents and where they're headed. It's fascinating because each sovereign wealth fund's approach to this and their goals and the nuance, the lens through which they look at their sports investments are materially different. And so things that are interesting to one country are very different from another country.
Yeah. So interesting, and I'd like to poke at that a little bit and talk about the live effect, which is, in the golf world was shaken up by Saudi Live Golf, which is questionable moving forward on that front. And Jason, I'm going to put you on the spot here. You operate an MLS team, you invest in sports internationally. Has that live effect changed the risk calculus for when evaluating an entry into a new market for you?
I think that the global investment of sport has been there, and so that's one example you're pointing out. But I think I don't know about the risk calculus, but the access to investment, you've seen a wider array of opportunity for that. So I was thinking about your comment about basketball in Europe.
Yeah.
I just got back. I was at the EuroLeague
Yes,
Final
FIBA, we
Four.
wanted to
I was in Athens last week for the EuroLeague Final Four, and I was there 20 years ago in Prague at the EuroLeague Final Four. And to see the growth of basketball, the commercialization of the game, how it's evolved in those 20 years is pretty incredible. And I started thinking about what it's going to look like 20 years from now, because basketball is one of the sports globally that you're seeing the footprint on and how it's grown. You know, Paxton is an investor in NBA Africa. And so he's filled me in a lot about what the growth of the game has meant in Africa as well. So I think to circle back on your live point, I think that the pools of capital, the interest in investing in sport globally has been there, but that is a prime example of one area and one vertical where you've seen that investment, how it's disrupted sport.
Yeah. Could you just pick up real quickly on the FIBA question, which I think Jay kind of punted to you, their reaction to NBA Europe?
It's really interesting because they're trying to figure out how to take the best of American commercialization of basketball as a sport, and the premium experience and the excitement level and the engagement and the media that goes with that, but also hold on to a lot of the tradition. Yeah. Because there's tremendous tradition in European basketball, and the tribalism for the game and the teams and the clubs and the passion for that, they want to hold on to that authenticity. So right. I think you're seeing this moment where those two may bump heads, but also can coexist, and they're trying to figure out what is the right way to proceed.
2-minute warning, so we're going to run a fast drill here, guys. Paxton, outside of the U.S., Europe, Gulf states, is there a specific country or region that you think is undervalued, ripe for a major international sports investment push?
Right. I would say NBA Africa. And the NBA is putting a lot of attention into it. And last year, or actually earlier this year, they made the announcement that they're looking to get 12 teams up to a $50 million valuation across the continent and build them out. Right now, the model, NBA Africa has been there for 6 years, and it's kind of been it's almost like kind of a semi-pro piece, and it's becoming much more professional. The NBA is putting a lot of attention into it. They're going to get 12 teams up to a $50 million valuation, and those are going to be some pretty key opportunities. In addition to that, they built out the NBA Africa, or the academy in South Africa. And if you look at the amount of NBA players that are coming from Africa now, you're seeing the effect immediately on basketball here in the States from African players.
Yeah, clearly.
In it. So I think that's probably one of the greater opportunities that's there right now.
Yeah, we're going to see that impact tonight when the New York Knicks defeat the San Antonio Spurs.
I'm wishful for you guys, but that said, like the key piece to it is for those investors who are kind of looking to get into something. I think that's a great opportunity that's here right now. But be careful coming in. I partner with Jason every opportunity I get. The last 2 or 3 ventures you've done, and the ones 2 or 3 he's got coming, I'm partnering with him on. So work with people that you know, and that's where the opportunities will be, with good quality people.
That's great.
I think the best opportunity that I see right now, one of them is right under our nose, which is Major League Soccer. Soccer's become the 3rd most popular sport in the United States. The global game, the World Cup being here, I think it's still very much undervalued. I think there's a huge growth trajectory for soccer in America. We've seen some momentum, but the next 20 years, I think it's going to be much more robust.
I thought I heard that in '94 also, though, of course. But
and you did. And you did see where there was no lead in
right now.
So I have a million more questions that I'm going to take offline right now, but I want to thank these gentlemen, Jake, Jason, Paxton, for a really great discussion. Please.
Please welcome to the stage Georgetown University men's basketball general manager Greg Colucci and Jetta Global Sports and Entertainment founder and CEO Travis Murphy for a conversation with FP's Rishi Iyengar.